Hey everyone, it's your buddy, it's your pal, it's Karnak, Star Wars Armada Explained. Today I'm going to be redoing my objective hyperspace migration video because we just got a new FAQ release that is updating how the objective is played. My previous video, I had some things in there that just at the time we didn't know how the card essentially exactly worked. We had a good idea, but now that we have this updated FAQ clarification, that's drastically going to help making sure I'm giving the best information possible. So here's the new video. Let's dive right in. Oh, I need to have the FAQ open. That might be a good idea. There we go. All right. So not only did we get an errata, we also got a clarification for hyperspace migration. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read the card and then I'll point out what's corrected. Yep. Let me hit the right buttons here. Here we go. So hyperspace migration, I've got it blown up nice and big right there. This is the old card text, okay, not the updated one. Setup, place obstacles as normal, excluding the station. Then the second player places one objective token in the play area at distance 1 of a 3-foot edge, and another objective token at distance 1 of the opposite 3-foot edge. Special rule. At the start of the ship phase of the first and third rounds, the second player places one Purgle not in the play area at distance 1 of one objective token. The objective token must be the same during both rounds. When a Purgle moves, it must move towards the objective token at the opposite 3-foot edge. When a Purgle touches that objective token, that Purgle is removed from the play area. End of round. If a ship has one objective token on it, remove the token, and that ship's owner gains one victory token. If a ship is at distance 1 from a Purgle and has no objective tokens on it, place one objective token on the ship. So originally, that end of round wording was very confusing because, one, it's the same timing as when Purgles move, so we didn't know, do Purgles move first? Do they move second? Can you claim and not claim objective tokens at the same time? It's all been taken care of with the new FAQ, which I'm going to read here. So hyperspace migration, the end of round rule for hyperspace migration objective should read, meaning whatever it says on that card that is no longer correct, this is the new reading. For each ship, if it has an objective token on it, remove that token and that ship's owner gains one victory token. If it has no objective token on it and is at distance 1 of a Purgle, place one objective token on that ship, then players move each Purgle. So it's eliminated that fuzzy timing window, and it's also cleared up the text. There's now also a clarification for this card that reads, during the same round, a ship can either receive an objective or remove an objective token from itself to receive a victory token. This means a ship can only score every other round. Players move Purgle as normal after all ships gain or discard tokens. So again, they're being super clear on it, which is perfect because before it wasn't 100% clear. Now it absolutely is. So I need one of my rule books here. I totally forgot about my Rebellion the Rim. Perfect. Okay, so let's get into how this objective works then. How do you play this objective? So let's start from the top. Setup. Place obstacles as normal, which again, when it says that, it means the standard obstacle placement within the setup area beyond distance 3 of both players' edges. You exclude the station. So the station, you don't need it. You chuck that out of here. Boom. Nope, let me shrink this back down. There we go. We don't need that blocking what I'm doing. Perfect. So you take that station, you throw it away. Then the second player places one objective token in the play area. When it means play area, it means the entire mat is a play area, which is further delineated into a setup zone, which are these two vertical lines here. And then within the setup zone, you have deployment areas and etc. Okay. So we've checked that. Now we need to place these objective tokens. So let's go ahead and get these moved out of the way. We'll just stick them right here for now. Move all this stuff down here. Perfect. So we need to place an objective token in the play area at a distance 1 of a 3-foot edge, and another objective token essentially on the opposite 3-foot edge. So the 3-foot edges are the short edges, 3 foot, 3 foot, because this is 6 foot on the bottom, 6 foot on top. Okay. So let's see here. We need to measure. Let's get this objective token over here. Obviously, it behooves you to place this on your end, so that way you can start scoring points. So when it means at distance 1, when you take out your range ruler, let's see if I can get that zoomed in over here a little bit better. There we go. So this black circle is at distance, is distance 1, red is 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to see here. Now this is at distance 1. And when it says at, you can place the token, for example, if you wanted to place it there, absolutely could. Usually, though, you want to try to place it, you know, at the maximum range, because when the Purgle is placed, it's based off of where that token is, so you kind of want it closer to you. Okay, so this is, we're gonna say, you know what, we want this right here, and now that is at distance 1. Okay, now we go to the opposite side. We take this token, and you know what, I'm going to put this one a little bit further down, and I'll explain why I'm going to do that in a moment. And we'll put this here, and we're going to say, you know what, that's close enough. That's at distance 1. And if you wanted to put those objective tokens, for example, like that one there, where you see here, and you wanted to take this other one, if you wanted to put it way up here, so that way when the Purgles are moving, they're going diagonally across the table, you can, but there's pretty much no reason to do that. You almost always want the Purgles to be where you can have access to them, not where your opponent can have access to them. All right. Before I move on to anything else, these objective tokens, as you know, objective tokens can be manipulated by strategic, meaning that, you know, Squadron Strategic can move these tokens around. The question I've often been asked is, can you throw these off the table? And my response to this has always been no, based on a developer's comment. When I asked this question, his response was, that's ridiculous. And also because when you're moving objective tokens, it is in the rulebook saying that you have to place your tool in the play area to move. So no, you can't throw objective tokens off the play area. They have to stay in the play area. Okay. So now we've got the objective tokens down. The obstacles need to be placed first before the tokens. Man, I'm just totally screwing it up, but that's not a big deal. So we'll say we placed all the obstacles, boom, and then we place the objective tokens. The second player places those. Great. All right, now we get into the special rule. So let's go ahead and say, you know what? So when you are placing your ships for deployment, at some point, the Purgles are going to be placed, and you'll have to choose which side of the board you want them to start on, either the left or the right side. So it does give away a little bit of your deployment strategy, because obviously you're going to be in one corner or the other, so you can start claiming victory points. But what you can do as well is you could like deploy a ship in the middle, and then one ship to the left and one ship to the right, and then you're not giving your opponent any information about where stuff potentially could end up. Obviously, though, then you're spreading your ships way out, and you're not going to be able to claim as many victory tokens that you would probably want. So we're going to say something like this. We're going to turn this MC80 to be sideways, just so you guys can see the power of this objective and potentially how many points you could still get. Because before, when I erroneously thought that you could score on this objective every round, you could score something like 200 points by the end of the game with like 4 ships, and it was ridiculous. Now that's limited. You can still score a lot of points, but now it's not so punishing for the first player. It's such a NPE experience. Get these ships turned here real quick. All right. So we're going to say that over the course of deployment, you're putting ships down, your opponent is putting ships down, the first player. Again, I just want to get this point across. So we're going to say something like, do something like that, and something like that. Perfect. Yeah, we'll just say this. I'm not going to get too technical. All right. So deployments happen. Now you get into the special rule. At the start of the ship phase of the first and third rounds, so this only takes place at the start of round 1 and round 3, the second player places one Purgle not in the play area at distance 1 of one of the objective tokens. The objective token must be the same during both rounds. So if you place a Purgle over here on round 3, this second Purgle also needs to be placed at distance 1 of the same token. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and place that Purgle. We're going to check the distance here. So it needs to be at distance 1 of the objective token. So we're going to stick his little tail end just right there. Perfect. So that is at distance 1. We've placed it. All right. The second part of the special rule says when a Purgle moves, it must move toward. Now, I wish they had bolded this part in the objective card because people skip over this all the time. Toward is a very specific keyword. It means something very specific for in terms of how this Purgle is going to move and how it has to move. And I'll cover that in 1 second. So it must move toward the objective token at the opposite 3-foot edge. When a Purgle touches that objective token, that Purgle is removed from the play area. Now, it is almost impossible for a Purgle to get to the opposite side. It can happen, sure, but you are essentially... It doesn't behoove you to do it, to have any reason to do it. That's just there just as a what if happens, if it reaches there, especially like on a 3x3 playmat, you could probably do it, but on a 3x6, it's never going to happen. So pretty much don't worry about that part. So let's get into the toward part. And then I'm going to cover, once I get done going to the card, I'm going to cover what Purgles do in terms of like their stuff. So toward is a very specific keyword for when you move obstacles. So it says toward. Some effects direct players to move an obstacle or token toward a ship, squadron, obstacle, other token, or portion of the play area. When this is specified, the player moving the obstacle must also follow these restrictions. So you have the wording for how obstacles are typically moved. Now you also have to follow these additional rules. This movement must be measured directly toward the other component, along a line from the closest point of the obstacle to the closest point on the other component. That obstacle or token must be moved from its current position to at least the line that marks the end of the distance band matching the specified minimum movement. If that object cannot be moved at specified minimum distance, it must be moved from its current position as close as possible to that line that marks the end of the specified minimum distance band. And they give an example here to show how that works. But obviously you can't really see that too well or read that too well, so I'm going to cover it. All right, so when it's the first thing you need to check is when you are going to move the Purgle towards the other token is you are measuring from the closest point to the closest point, meaning somewhere about there, measuring to the closest point of the token. So when you're moving this Purgle, it has to follow that line. You can't move it up, you can't move it down, you can't move it backwards. It has to move toward that objective token following that line as best it can. So in this example, we're going to say, it needs to move toward that token. So as you've shown here, I'm kind of drawing my line as best I can to where it needs to go. So somewhere along here. So it's going to check, can I move up to the minimum distance band? So again, the toward, it's saying you have to move at least minimum distance 1. So I'm going to copy this real quick just to show. So again, moving towards that token, it's saying you have to move up to at least the distance 1 band. So you can't just nudge it a little bit and be like, I moved it, it's done, it moved towards it. No, you have to move it to at least this point is at the minimum point there. So something like that. That is the minimum distance it has to move. Now, if you want it to move further than that, the full distance 1 to 2, you can. If you want to rotate it and do something like this, as long as there is a point on the obstacle that is close to, is pointing towards the objective token, so it is closest to that, you can do that as well. But again, if you can't do something like that, because that's not the full distance 1 length. It's got to at least be touching somewhere on that point, minimum distance 1 to that band, again, with one point on the obstacle being closer to where it needs to go, not pointed away from it. Again, just trying to be as clear as I can. All right. So what happens then if the Purgle is being blocked by either ships, tokens, squadrons, other obstacles, etc., then it needs to move as close as it possibly can. Meaning, as we know, it needs to follow this line here. It would move something like this to where it's touching the ship base. So it would have to move as far as it possibly could. It's compelled to. That's where it wants to go. So that is what the toward keyword component, essentially, in a nutshell, what all that means. I know it's a little bit more complicated than that. But to give another example, what happens if there's a ship in the way, but if you could somehow get over it? Like, for example, it's like this. So you as the player controlling the Purgle, are you forced to quote-unquote jump over this GR75? No. If you want to, you can, because you can rotate it. But let me make a clone of it. Because you can rotate it. On the right one, here we go. And do something like this. So if you want to do that, you can. But otherwise, you could still follow the normal closest point to closest point. How far can I move that Purgle? Well, I can move it to touch the edge of the shield dial. I'm still technically trying to follow the normal rule. I'm not, again, forced to jump over anything. It's compelled to try to move to the edge of the distance 1 band, but again, you're not forced to have to jump over it to rotate the obstacle. But you can if you want. Okay. All right, let me put all this stuff back to how I had it before. Great. All right. Let's talk about Purgles. How do they work? So Purgles, when a ship overlaps a Purgle obstacle, that ship suffers an amount of damage equal to its speed. When a squadron overlaps a Purgle, that squadron suffers 1 damage. At the end of each round, starting with the second player and alternating, each player chooses 1 Purgle obstacle and moves it within distance 1 to 2 of its current location. Each player must choose a different Purgle obstacle to move. So the objective is overriding how Purgles typically are moved. So that second part there about, they are moved end of round, and they can move distance 1 to 2. But again, the objective is kind of overriding their word. You can't move them any direction you want. They can only move toward the other objective token. So how does their damage work? So if you have a squadron, and the squadron ends its movement, whether that's, if it ends its movement on top of a Purgle, that squadron suffers 1 damage. Squadrons won't suffer damage if they're placed or deployed on them, okay? Because that's not overlapping as defined in RNG. I mean, in technical quotations, the literal word is, yes, they're overlapping. But remember, overlapping is a defined game term for how overlapping is resolved in Armada, not the same thing. So, for example, if Hondo Anaka was to pick up an enemy squadron, remember his wording is place. He places a squadron on the Purgle. That's not overlapping as defined as a game term. That squadron does not suffer damage. Again, same thing if you deploy or squadrons are otherwise placed on the Purgle. It's only when a ship or squadron ends a movement on top of it. So again, if there's a Purgle and you have somebody like Radis and you deploy a ship on top of the Purgle, that ship won't suffer any damage because deployment is not overlapping. It's deployment, etc. Okay. I think you guys get it. So how much damage does a ship suffer at speed, its speed? What does it mean by that? So for example, if this Pelta could somehow go speed 4, or just say magically that it can, it's a super fast modified Pelta. When it ends its movement on top of the Purgle, it suffers damage according to its speed. So what's the speed on its dial? It's 3. So it would suffer 3 damage. This damage is not an attack. It can't be braced, scattered, or otherwise reduced. For example, when you overlap a debris field, it's 2 damage, and you suffer that 2 damage. You choose 1 hull zone that will suffer that 2 damage. It's the same deal with the Purgle. So you're going to suffer 3 damage. You choose the whole zone you want to suffer that 3 damage to. You can't spread it around, 1 and 1 and 1. You have to choose 1 zone. All 3 damage is suffered to that zone. What happens if you also have a card like Engine Text, we'll say in this Pelta, and you make a temporary speed 1 maneuver? Which damage do you suffer? The temporary speed 1 maneuver from Engine Text? No. This was just clarified in the FAQ that when you conduct that engine text maneuver, you are still suffering damage according to the speed on your speed dial, which is, if you're at speed 3, that's another 3 damage you're going to suffer. So don't do that. So that's how the Purgle works. You suffer damage according to whatever the speed is on your ship's speed dial. So if you're going speed 1 on your dial, 1 damage. If you're going speed 4 on your dial, 4 damage. And again, if you make a secondary maneuver, it's again the same, whatever the damage is on your speed dial, that's what you're going to suffer regardless of the speed that your maneuver takes place at. Okay. I think I've covered all the smaller stuff. Let's get back into how does end of round work. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we get to end of round. So we're going to say all these ships are moving at speed 1. So we're going to say he moved 1, that guy moved 1, and this guy moved 1. Perfect. All right, now we get to end of round. So as I said before, this card text here is not the correct. We have the updated one. It specifically is stating that you have to resolve the end of round on the card text first before Purgles move. So let me bring that back up here. So the first thing you do is you need to check what ships are at distance 1 of the Purgle. So you check distance 1. Are any of these ships at distance 1 of the Purgle? They are not. No ship here is at distance 1 of the Purgle. So no ships gain any objective tokens. And a ship does not have an objective token on already to discard to claim any points. So then we move to the next step, which is now you move the Purgle. So the Purgle is going to move up to distance 1 towards the objective token. We're going to say it's going to move like this far. Okay. So that ends the first round. Now you go into the second round. And for this round, we're going to say that these ships, they all drop to speed 0. They don't want to, keep outrunning the Purgle. So then we get to end of round again. Okay, so now we check who's at distance 1 of the Purgle. This GR75 and this MC80 are at distance 1. They don't have an objective token, so they'll each gain an objective token. I'm just going to copy this just so you can visibly see. So each of these ships gain an objective token. Then you move the Purgle up. The Purgle's blocked. There's no way it can get past. It stays in place. Now you get to round 3. We're going to say these ships are moving again. So this one's going to move, and we're going to say that this one decides it's going to speed up to speed 3, and we're just going to say that somehow it manages to jump over the Pelta. Just believe your mind eye. I'm trying to make an example here. So it moves and jumps over the Pelta because maybe there's something bad. Maybe it doesn't like the space whale. Who knows? So now, end of round 3, end of round wording. Okay, so does a ship can only gain or discard an objective token. It can't do both. So what's at distance 1 of the Purgle? The MC80. The MC80 already has an objective token on it. It can't, even though you could discard this objective token, you're going to get a victory token worth 20 points. Because it discarded objective token, it also cannot gain an objective token. You can only do one or the other per round. You can't do both. So even though he's at distance 1, he can't get another token. Was anybody else in range? Nope. The this GR75 can still discard his objective token to also score a victory token, but again, he's not at distance 1 of the Purgle. Nothing else happens. This Purgle now moves the distance. Perfect. And that is, in a nutshell, how hyperspace migration works. So again, to be totally clear, you can only score on this objective essentially every other round. So on the first round, if you got a token, you could spend that token in round 2, claim a point. You could get a new token in round 3, spend it in 4, get a new token in 5, and spend it in 6. So essentially, the most opportunity ships are going to be able to have to score is only 3 times. But still, even with 3 ships at scoring, if you could score all the possible opportunities, so let's just do some quick math here. So we're going to say 3 times 3 tokens is 9 tokens times 20 points. is 180 points. You can still score a lot of points from that. But again, you're giving away your deployment strategy, and potentially your enemy is going to outflank you or otherwise capitalize on you just sitting in that corner. But that is hyperspace migration. There's no other crazy things going on, nothing else that I feel like I need to cover. But again, just to be clear, remember the toward keyword for when moving the Purgle obstacles. And just remember, you can only score every other round. And remember how Purgles work for the result of when a ship or squadron overlaps them. Of course, if you feel like I missed anything or didn't get anything right, please be sure to leave a comment, let me know, point something out, ask questions. I do love questions. Again, I'm so excited for Worlds. I'll see you guys there, and I'll catch you all next time.